וחולם על פגישה רחוקה. אין אפשר כי עוד ערב יבוא, והשער יחרוק לו דומם, ועינייך יהיו כה טובות, כמו אין מלחמה בעולם. אין אפשר שיהיה זה פשוט כבר מחר. אין אפשר ובג'יפ שעבר שגו בחורים כי נגמר. אין אפשר שיהיה זה פשוט כבר מחר. אין אפשר כי חדרך העצוב מחכה בחיוורון קירותיו, וקוראו לשנינו לשוב מקרבות, מדרכים ומסתיו. אין אפשר כי פתאום ניפגש במשלט או בדרך עפר. אין אפשר בין עשן ובין אש גם לחלום שהכל כבר נגמר. אין אפשר שיהיה זה פשוט כבר מחר. אין אפשר ובג'יפ שעבר שגו בחורים כי נגמר. אין אפשר שיהיה זה פשוט כבר מחר.
And we are back, and we are joined by Alon Schwartz, the director of this film. Hi, Alon.
Hi, how are you?
Great, good to see you, and thank you so much for making this film, and thank you for taking the time to be with us. Just a couple of announcements for our audience. This session will be now recorded and will be available. We are streaming it on Facebook also, so after the session, you'll be able to view this session again on Facebook and share it with your friends. Please enter your questions in the Q&A tab, and you can enter comments in the chat tab. Please try to avoid entering comments in the Q&A and entering questions in the chat. Given the number of people here, we will only be monitoring the Q&A tab for questions. Before we get started, Krista, would you provide us just a brief introduction to our guest, Alon Schwartz?
Sure, Alon, thank you so much for, can you hear me okay? Thank you so much for joining us today and for allowing us to watch this film with you. It's really quite powerful. And, you know, you've taken what was a buried history and brought it to life so that we can all think about the competing narratives related to Israel and Palestine and how important it is for all of us to know the truth and to consider both sides of the story and also look at the evidence about what really happened. So, you know, we're really looking forward to hearing more about how you decided to make this film. And I know some of our viewers are interested to know whether Teddy is still alive. the fact that you could feature him in this film the way you did and bring his words back to life is really quite powerful. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
I know you first showed this last year at the Sundance Film Festival. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was actually the opening film of Sundance, of the World Documentary Competition.
Opening film. So that's really an honor for you to have that position, and I think it deserves that place. Perhaps you could just start by telling us how you decided to make this film and got back in touch with Teddy, and what it felt like to have that film aired live finally before the world at Sundance Festival. And then we'll get to questions. Thanks.
So first of all, Teddy is alive, and he's not doing very well physically, of course, but he's you know, the film kind of brought him back to life, I think, and he's alive. He lives in Kibbutz Mangal, and he was very happy that this film came out. I didn't decide to make this film. I was working on a completely different film. It had to do with organizations such as B'Tselem and Breaking the Silence and Taboos, which are three Israeli organizations working in the 1967 occupied territories, trying to help different aspects of Palestinian society. And I stumbled across this story after I already shot almost 50 days of that other film. And as a documentarist, when you stumble across a story like this, and I realized that there are tapes, you get very excited because it's like a treasure. It's like finding a treasure. And when I called Teddy up and I came and he eventually I listened to the tapes and I understood that we have a really interesting story and a really special way to tell it. So it's not that I planned to make a story about the Nakba or Tantura. I didn't know much about the Nakba. I grew up in Israel, part of my childhood, and we're not taught this story. A lot of Israelis don't know the story of 1948 because we're told a different story. And this is quite obvious. You know, it happens not only in Israel, unfortunately, it happens in America, happens in Australia. Countries tell their people, teach their kids sugar-coated stories about history. So, and when I finally got the tapes and listened, I knew I had to do this movie, and at first, because it was impossible not to do it. Yeah, so that's how it started.
Let me ask another question, Alon. A lot of people are curious as to how many more Tanturas are there that nobody knows about, and is there any effort to discover some of the other hotspots in there?
Look, I don't think anybody knows for sure how many more Tanturas. What is a Tantura? It's a killing of people or combatants after a battle ends, or sometimes of civilians also. Nobody knows for sure how many. Unfortunately, for Palestinian history, it's not very well documented. And whatever was documented was seized or destroyed by Israeli forces along the years. And there's a very there is a Palestinian archive in the IDF archive. It was taken in Beirut in 1982. So we don't know for sure, but the guy, one of the people who ran the Israeli IDF archives, has publicly said that he's seen more than 50 cases referenced in the archive that reference the killing of at least 50 people. So this was a war between the young army, the young IDF, which was really the Haganah, and militias, villagers, armed villagers, and outside the forces, Arabic Palestinians, and there, I think there were a lot. Just to be honest, there were also just such cases from the other side. I mean, there were cases of massacres where Jews got massacred by Palestinians, but there's no question that it's not a symmetric thing, and there were more such cases where Palestinians were killed, probably over 50. probably over 50. Now, not all of them, we don't know the size of them. We also, I have to say, be honest, we don't really know exactly how many people got murdered in Tantura after the battle. It may be 70, it may be 100, it may be 270, like one of the people said, one of the guys that was buried there. We simply do not know. And this is the nature of such things. If you don't find the grave, dig it up, and do forensics, like they did in Bosnia, like they did in other places, you don't know. There's no way of knowing. But it certainly wasn't a single event, that's for sure.
I know that Salman Abu Sitti has done quite a bit of research on this topic, and on his Palestine Land Society website, he does have an article about the other massacres that did happen, for those who are interested in looking at what some researchers have concluded in terms of how many massacres have happened and how extensive they were. One of our viewers wanted to just point out, and perhaps you could comment on this, Alon, the fact that we have, the Nakba is not just something that happened a long time ago. There's the concept of the ongoing Nakba, that people continue to lose land, lose homes, lose their lives to this day. If you could just comment on that related to
I myself don't like the term ongoing Nakba, and I'm not comparing between the two events. Just like I wouldn't say an ongoing Holocaust. I think the Nakba was an event, an event of ethnic cleansing in 1948. And I think that's an event that should be described as Nakba. Later on, there was 1967, I think it's referred to as the Naksa. And today, we don't have an ethnic cleansing in the form of mass massacres. There is a continued killing of civilians, and that is not investigated well enough, that is not in Israel. And there are terrible things happening in territories today, which is part of an apartheid regime. But I don't think, for me, I wouldn't call it an ongoing Nakba. The Nakba happened, for me, in 1948. Again, it's not mine, it's the Palestinians to define it. But I think it's a mistake, both technically, historically, and as how do you pitch it to the world. I don't think it's the correct term to use. What's happening, the Nakba was terrible, and what's happening today is terrible, and different events. However, it's I think what is happening today is kind of worse. Why is it worse? Not because of the numbers, because, and again, this is going to be very hard for a Palestinian crowd to grasp what I'm saying, or to agree with it. It may anger some people. In 1948, a terrible thing happened to the Palestinians, but it was in the context of history. In the context of history, it happened to people 3 years or 4 years after the Holocaust, and you can understand that in that period, Nakbas happened also in Europe. Today, Israel is not this weak force that just got killed in the gas chambers. Today, Israel is a very strong country, and there's no real reason for what's happening today to keep on happening. So for me, again, on a moral level, today is much worse on a moral level than what happened in 1948. What happened in 1948 was a terrible war and a tragedy for the Palestinians. But as an Israeli and somebody that grew up in a Zionist upbringing, I understand that it was perceived as a war of survival on the Jewish side also, and it was taught that way. Today, what we're doing is, for me, what's much worse. In fact, today we're a giant, strong, very strong military force that has no justification to do what we're doing, and I'm ashamed of what we're doing, and I hope it will stop. And I think the only way it will stop if there will be pressure from external powers on Israel. I don't think the Palestinian side and the Israeli side are capable of stopping what's happening today. The two sides will stop it and talk. I think it's complete nonsense. And just like what happened in South Africa, I think it should be done in Israel today.
You mentioned that as your upbringing, you didn't learn about the Nakba, you didn't know about it. And I know that to this day, the Nakba is something that is not taught in Israeli schools. So obviously your film is an incredible contribution to raising awareness of the Nakba and events leading up to and since. How do we move past, you said pressure, international pressure, what happened in South Africa, but at the human level, how do we make space for telling the truth so that Israelis, Jews around the world can, and others who have supported the Israeli narrative that leaves a lot of these details out of the story. What is your thought as an artist, besides, of course, your incredibly powerful film? How do we reach people's hearts and minds so that we can actually have conversations and move forward and look to the future?
Excuse me, Krista, I apologize. The chat had not been enabled. Now it's enabled. So please put your comments in the chat and the question, the QA. My fault, sorry.
Thanks, Faisal.
Alon, there are a lot of questions and interest in finding out.
Did I answer Krista's question, or are we jumping to the next thing? Just to.
Well, my question addresses one of the first questions, which is what will it take for Israelis to lift the taboo on accepting that the Zionists deliberately drove Palestinians from their homes? So that's basically addressing how do we get Israeli society to, open their eyes to the past so that we can look into the future?
It's very hard. This film opened Sundance. It was broadcast on Israeli Channel 8. It's available on video on demand. The problem is, and so a lot of people in Israel saw it, but not so many, especially the left side saw it, and Palestinians saw it here. It's very, very hard. But the problem is that it's now available online, but only in the pay-per-view channels. No, Netflix didn't put it, didn't want to buy it. The big theatrical distribution companies in America didn't buy it. So yes, at the end we can put it on a platform and people can pay $3, but very little people view it actually. How do we get it in front of 10 million people? You get a company like Netflix to buy it, and you ask them why they didn't buy it, and you get major distributions to put it on their free platforms, which they didn't do, in fact. And you get European TVs to buy it. There is a silencing around the subject of the Nakba, and yes, there is every once in a while there is a contradicting example. Farha, for example, did get now bought. But at the end of the day, it's a very hard thing, and most Israelis don't know about it or don't want to know about it. And there's no easy answer for this. I don't think the key is to. It's important to educate Israeli society, but I think the key today is in America. I think the problem is America, because America has a huge impact on Israel, on the right of Israel, not only in the left, of course. And if America, if this film was seen by all the congressmen and all the senators in America, it would help. It would help. And the problem, why don't people want to see it? Why don't people want to acknowledge? Because there is this elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room, and this I'm saying to Palestinians in America, the elephant in the room is if. For Jews, for Israel supporters, is if we acknowledge this, what happens to Israel? What happens to the right of return? And at the base, there's an argument. There's an argument here that says if we recognize this, then we have to have all the Palestinians come back, and then there's no state of Israel. That's the elephant in the room. And what I'm trying to do, and I have a very tough conversation both with Israelis from the left also, and with Palestinians. And I think everybody knows, all people that are logical know what the solution is, or the way to go forward. The way to go forward is what has been put by Rabin and by Arafat years ago, and by the Arabic National League, or the Saudi plan, whatever you call it. It's a two-state solution. That for me is the only, and whatever the borders are, yeah. At the end, that's the only solution, and people don't want to go forward with that. And a lot of Palestinians are saying, let's have one state and Israel has no right to exist. And on the Israeli side, they said no. We also want it from the Jordan to the river, and that's our problem. The problem is that both Palestinians and Israelis are divided societies. Both are divided societies, and on both sides, the street and the extremists rule. It's also true for the Palestinian side, not only for the Israeli side, by the way. The difference is that the official Israel is ran by the fanatics, the fascists, and I think the Palestinian street, Hamas, and the street also in the West Bank also they have a very strong force. And this is the problem. The problem is that the moderates never, like moderates, they don't want to be too forceful and they don't rule. And the only way to go forward is to have mutual acknowledgement. The Israelis need to understand that the Palestinians are not going to go anywhere. And the Palestinians need to understand that the Jews also are not going to go anywhere. We're going to stay here. We're going to have to live together. And if one day we want to have one state, okay. But I think at least for the first stage, you need to have two entities that really recognize each other, that really are saying, okay, we're going to live as neighbors. And I think the right of return, at least from the Israeli DNA of thinking, cannot happen. It can happen in small scales, like they talked about in Oslo at the time, but that needs to be acknowledged. And I think Israelis need to acknowledge the Nakba. And I think they need, like my grandparents who escaped Hitler and all the families got killed, they got money and got paid. Not that you can pay for such a tragedy, but I think that's a maturity that does not exist, not on the Israeli side and not on the Palestinian side. Although all the leaders know the answers, all the leaders know the truth, all the leaders of Palestinian side, Abu Mazen knows he's not going to come back to Tiberias, and the Israeli leadership knows that the Palestinians are not going to go anywhere. But nobody's saying the truth. Nobody's saying the truth for so many years. We had two brave leaders here, Arafat and Rabin, that were actually going to do this process. One got murdered by a Jewish fanatic, Rabin, and the other, word has it, got killed by Israelis. One day it will come out. So again, the problem is telling the truth, and telling the truth to your own people also, and it's not done by any side today. Yeah. And I think the key is to have a two-state solution, and it has to be enforced by America. If America decides it wants to enforce it, it will happen within weeks. America has the power to do it, to force Israel to do it, to force the Palestinians to do it. Otherwise, we're going to fight a war for 100 years.
Well, what you're saying,
and I apologize if it's disruptive for people. It annoys Israelis, it annoys Palestinians, but this is the truth. This is the truth.
What you're saying actually shows that there's actually both sides have a lot more in common than we give them credit for in terms of perception of the whole country, and so the future will unfold. We will see what happens. But I wonder if you could say a little more about the process of making this film, of any pushback that you got in the process of making it, or since showing it, what kind of reactions you've had from audiences, and also say a little more about what Teddy himself experienced being under a lot of pressure to release that statement. And I know that it severely affected his health. He ended up having a number of strokes. And if you could just talk a little more about the experience of doing work like this from his perspective and yours, and also what lies ahead for you. Thanks.
Many questions. Let's go one by one.
I know, I'm sorry.
I can't follow so many questions.
We have so many questions, so I'm trying to condense.
I don't have a time limit, so
okay.
As long as you want to go, I'm here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so just basically like the process of making this film and what pushback you've had, and how the film was received, and also Teddy's experience in that whole process.
When I made this film, we were very scared what would happen when we came back or come out with it. But to tell you the truth, from Israel, I didn't have pushback from the government or anything. Up till very recently, we lived in a fairly democratic, at least for the Jews, it was very democratic here. Now that's changing also, by the way, but that's another story with the new government, which is terrible and not democratic at all. But we didn't get pushback, but there was for almost 7 months articles every week in in the papers, criticizing me, some really liking the film. It was a big subject in Israeli papers because even for the left in Israel, it's very hard to recognize the story. And then about Tantura, because there was a very detailed argument about the very details of how many people got killed, it became a whole. There was many articles in Haaretz, especially in Haaretz newspaper, which is like the Israeli New York Times. And I get put, I screen it in all over the world. I've been all around the world with it, and I get pushback from Israelis sometimes saying this is not true, it can't be. It shakes the ground for Israelis, and from Palestinians when I said what I said here, that the right of return will not happen probably on a mass scale, because that's the DNA of Israel. Israelis will not give up the Jewish state concept. It's very hard. They get very angry at me. They love me very much when the film ends and they want to hug me, but then when I say the truth, they're very angry at me. But I think it's important to tell the truth to both people. And I think there should be confrontation. I think it should be recognition of the Nakba. And I think ultimately, if we live as two states in peace, maybe one day it will be one confederacy or one country. And maybe after 100 years of peace, nobody will care if it's a Jewish or Muslim or whatever state. But right now, in our day and age, I think we're so alienated, it's not going to be possible. There's a lot of anger, and you need to first have many years of peace and prosperity in order to move to the next stage. So that's basically, I hope I answered your question.
Krista, let me interrupt a second. Before we have people leaving, I want to make sure a lot of the people are still here to get the information. Alon, there are maybe like 5 or 6 places where people can watch this film on a pay-per-view, correct?
Yes. If you go to www.tantura-film.com, you'll get all the links. I can put it in the chat if you want.
Yeah, if you don't mind, that'd be great if you could do that.
Yeah, many of our viewers are wanting to know how to see it again. Or
there's about 100 questions about it.
Yes, I know. That's why I'm sifting through the questions.
And
let's make sure that it works. There's by the way Arabic subtitles, French subtitles, and English subtitles.
Excellent.
So there's a bunch of I don't. Does this link work? I don't know if it works.
We haven't seen it. Wait a second. The Tantura film.
Tantura-film.com.
Actually, if you just go on the web also and type "watch Tantura," you get like 4 or 5 things, including like YouTube, Amazon Prime, and some.
Yes, exactly. You're right. It's available on YouTube, on Vimeo, on Apple.
Yeah. There are about 4 or 5.
Someone's also asking how you show, if you want to organize a public screening, how would you do that?
You get in touch with me, basically,
okay.
Or with our company in New York, or there's a sales agent also in England called Journeyman Films who can do that. So you can get online and get in touch with the director or the producer of the sales company. Again, it's journeymanfilms.com, and there's our sales agent, and basically and I also love to do speaking events if there's a crowd.
Yeah.
One of our viewers asked about the importance of acknowledging the past and how strongly that's valued. I think we're well aware of keeping the memory of the Holocaust alive and Jewish persecution in general throughout history. You're one of the people in your film mentioned when they went to Poland and Warsaw, they saw monuments. I've seen monuments in Germany. And with that value of remembering, the importance of remembering and acknowledging the past, how do we, again, these are challenging questions for all of us, but how do we move Israeli society to a point where we can acknowledge, I know there have been like groups that go to destroyed villages and put up signs, and then of course they're all taken down because there's no official recognition or even permission to acknowledge the places and the events of history for for the Nakba. I wonder if you could just speak a little to that, since many of our viewers were curious about that.
I don't think. Look, a lot of Israelis simply don't believe it, because when you're taught something from when you are born that, that they tell you this is true, you don't believe. And a lot of Israelis to think is, this story about us being the most moral army in the world. It's problematic. I don't have an easy way. I made this film. I gave my life for this film 3 years, and I lost endless amounts of cash, of money, and I sacrificed a lot for this film. And it's not easy. And it opened Sundance and went all over the world. But until American corporate buyers don't stop being afraid to show it to millions, then it doesn't have. It can't change millions' hearts. At the end, thousands and thousands watched it, but you need millions to watch it, tens of millions. And this is the problem. It's a problem. I think the initiative of going to the UN that the Palestinian Authority is doing now is an important thing. I think the answer will come from outside. I don't think it's easy to change Israeli society. I think the most important thing is for America and American policymakers and politicians to recognize this, and an American jury. I think American jury, the left side, J Street, should see this film. We offered it to J Street. They didn't take it. It's a left-wing organization. It's a liberal organization.
Alon, after we...
I think the key is there, because in Israel we did what we could, but I can tell you one thing: it's going south now, because the new government will not let more films like this and others be made. They're defunding these films now, so it's a very hard question to answer.
I just want to comment on what you said. I've emailed somebody at the Jewish Community Center in the town where we are in, which has about over 1,000 members at least. And I told them about the film and invited them to attend. And but I was told that they have another event that day, and it's not going to work. The time before it, they said, "This film is on Saturday. We can't watch it on Saturday." So we made the film on Sunday on purpose. But it did not help. But the question is, and that's a question from a number of people here, is we know, and I agree with you, that the American Jewish community is very crucial to the U.S. foreign policy here.
Yes.
And they hold the key to what the U.S. will do, and what the U.S. will do with respect to Palestine and Israel is the only thing that can make facts on the ground change.
Absolutely.
So
you're not going to get anywhere with the Israelis. Even the Israeli left, the Zionist left, which really want peace.
Yeah.
I have a hard time with the Nakba because they're afraid and they don't believe.
So
they're told by people like Benny Morris that it would happen, but small numbers, and everything is relative. But the key is in America.
So what can you tell the progressive members of the Jewish community in the U.S.? What can you tell them that they can do to influence the U.S. foreign policy?
I went around America and I tried to talk to the numbers that came to other Israel festival and others. I tell them, if you love Israel and if you want the Jewish state to keep on going, a two-state solution is the right way to go, because otherwise in 2 generations it will end. And I think it's a correct message. I believe that there should be a Jewish state. Don't get me wrong. I think the Jews need a little corner of the world, and it's not a fair world. It's not a fair world. And yes, it came instead of Palestinians. But that's history, and we cannot change history. Unfortunately, that's physical law. But we can make it more right. We can make it more just. We can stop apartheid in the 1967 borders. We can have a free Palestinian state. We can stop apartheid. We can pay reparations for Palestinian families that got hurt by years and years, by decades of oppression, and we can make it right. If the Palestinians keep on playing the record of the right of return, no Israel, then the Israelis will continue their own same track. But I think if the Palestinians are smart And if the American jury is smart, they'll push for what Israel is trying to avoid, which is the two-state solution at the first stage, at least. And this is something that we almost had 20 years ago, but the leaders got killed. And today it's like, oh, it didn't work. So the other option is endless war, which is what we have now, endless war. And in Israel, there's a fascist government now, a complete loss of democracy. It's a whole new subject, where this film looks like an anecdote now. I did it hoping the left in Israel would wake up and realize what the Nakba was after I realized what it was. So I think the key is working on the liberal American Jews, the left in Israel, which is very hard to work on, but I think that needs to go on. And I think what the Palestinians are doing, going to the UN and recognizing the Nakba, Abu Mazen now talked about it, and the UN just got a decision that the Nakba will be recognized after 75 years. It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal, I think. That should be continued. And it's not only the recognition of the Nakba. The purpose of looking at history is to have a better future. So to recognize what happened in the Nakba is not to reverse history, but to have it be realized by Israelis, so we can look at the just solution. Israelis today don't see the other side. They don't want. In Israel, people say there's no Palestinian people. They don't exist. It's beyond craziness. And one of the things that you do when you recognize that there was a Palestinian culture here, and there were over 600 villages and cities, and the whole world here, is not to completely reverse history, is to make Israelis realize and make the world realize that it existed and that we must recognize it.
Alon, you mentioned that with your upbringing that you didn't always know about the Nakba. So one of our viewers is really curious, since we're talking about how do people come to even be open to this topic, can you remember the moment or the moments leading up to how you became open to looking at this history and making it a part ultimately of your life work?
I wasn't aware. Look, well, I was aware that in 1948 there was a war, and I knew about Dir Yassin as a massacre that happened, which everybody's thought about that in Israel, Dir Yassin. And I knew about Kafar Qasem, which happened in 1956, and that's it. That's what I knew. And I knew there was a civil war, and that the Palestinians got out of here. The common story in Israel is that they ran away by themselves, all of them. When you really think about it, you understand it's not true. People, we know the Arab culture. We know that both Jews and Arab Palestinians, the land is very important to them. Both sides were very similar, not only in the food we eat, also in this thing of connection to the land. But you grow up with the story, and when I started dealing with the tapes, it was very depressing. Not only because you hear the stories, but because you realize that you grew up in a sugar-coated with a sugar-coated story. And I went through the psychological process. I've always been a leftist. I've always been a pro-peace activist, more or less, but still I wasn't aware of the story. And for me, that was very, very strong and very depressing. Very depressing. Again, what's important today is to think how to have a better future, and the determination of both sides to have everything is what has led us to this situation.
Okay.
And it will lead us to, yeah.
I appreciate that you believe the two-state solution is the way to go, but how do you? I'm just curious. What is your thinking about the 700,000-800,000 settlers who live in the West Bank now? Where are those gonna go?
If there is international pressure, real international pressure, not games, like there was in South Africa and more, a lot of them will move. Will be moved, will be forced to move. The Israeli army knows how to evacuate people. Now, it knows what happened in Sinai, what happened in Gaza, smaller numbers, but it happened. When Israel wants something, it knows how to do it. Now, we are so far from this right now. We're so far politically in Israel that it's impossible to imagine. But yeah, this is the most right-wing, crazy nationalist government we've ever seen. Far worse than everything else. But a few days, 2 days ago, the settlers put up a new settlers, and the American representative talked to Netanyahu, and in several hours they kicked them out. Today, the Smotrich and Ben-Gvir didn't come to the government meeting because of this. So America has absolute control, almost absolute control of Israeli powers. Netanyahu will not mess with America. America is the key to everything. It will not happen alone. There's not a political power in Israel that can do this, but with a little pressure, not with a lot, but a lot more than now, Israel will talk differently. And this is the way to go. It's the only way to go. If American money stops pouring here, and if European countries tell Israel you need a visa now to come to Europe, and if America is okay, if you don't do this, less weapons, Israel will talk differently. It's all about interest. It's all about interest. That's the truth, and Americans know this. And America is the enabler. America is the enabler of the Israeli policy.
Well, we can only hope that America will also.
There's only one more thing that can happen. There's only one more thing that can happen that is unrealistic in Israeli politics. If the Israeli left, the Zionist left, and the post-Zionist Jews and the Palestinian Israelis that live within the 48 borders today unite into a political power, which I'm working very hard to convince people to do, then that could also change because there's a majority there. The right wing today doesn't have a majority, but this is not. But this will be true for the next 10 to 15 years. After that, the majority will be right wing. But today, the Zionist left and the post-Zionist left and the Palestinian living in Israel are completely divided. Not only that, the Palestinians living and voting inside Israel are also completely divided. In the last election, in the elections before, there were 15 mandates, 15 Knesset members came from the Arabic Party, and then they decided to split. So the problem of the left in Israel, Zionist and not Zionist, is that they don't run together. In the right, they run together, and this is a real problem. And that's I don't know how to solve it. I'm talking to politicians I'm talking to Ayman Ouda, and I'm talking to others, never mind, in the Israeli side, to unite, but they cannot grasp that, and that's very sad.
Alon, I wonder if you could comment on the support you got from the Israel Film Commission and what the other artists will face. You mentioned with the current government, it may be more difficult to make such films. We know that among Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship, those film directors, many of them have left the country so that they can actually get the support they need to market their film as a Palestinian film, Palestinian story. Where do we stand today with making such films to raise awareness of the past so we can have a better future?
Look, you can say about Israel many bad things, but one thing you can't say to citizens living here, if they're good filmmakers, they get support. Up till today, I'm talking up till this government, there was like a Berlin Wall between the politicians and the taxpayers' money funding films. I also didn't get money for many years, but my films were not good enough. When you have a good story, whether it's right or left, the people in the funds and the people in the channels are professionals here, and they have complete today. They have complete legal separation from the politicians. So when I came to in this case, the new fund for cinema and television, and to HOT, Channel 8, but it's also true for Yes and for Khan and for all the channels in Israel. They see a good story, they will fund it, and I'm very proud to be an Israeli filmmaker. This will change now because this new fascist government that just came into power, which has extreme super extreme people that were outside of the camp up till now, really Kahana people. Ben Gvir is Kahana. This is a Jewish supremacy party that reminds me of Germany in in the years when they started. It's going to change. They're talking about not funding, going after, retroactively taking funds from filmmakers that made films. There's a film called H2, The Occupation Lab. I really recommend you to screen it to your audience. It's a great film about Hebron. But what happened, it's like an occupation lab. There's many films made in Israel. There's Blue Box by Michal White, which talked about, her great-grandfather was the guy who planned the transfer of Palestinians out of here. So these films are made in Israel. They're not known in the Arab world or abroad, but they are made in Israel because of these very brave people in the fund. Unfortunately, there is auto-censorship. In America, it's censored. You can't get it on Netflix, forget it. They won't put it. And that's what annoys me, because if 10 million people saw these films in America, that would change. And for the Palestinians, I say, saw those films. Tantura, in a way, broke this taboo, because what happens is, and this is also crazy, and I'm criticizing the Palestinian side now, and it's not about my film, because my film broke through this ceiling, but Palestinians don't watch films because it's an Israeli director. I got a call from Abu Mazen at the time, after it went up to Sundance, from his office, and said, we want to see the film. And they saw the film, and I met the Palestinian representatives, and Tantura is the first documentary film ever to be bought by both Israeli TV and Palestinian TV. That's amazing. But what about all the other films? What about Blue Box? What about H2? The Palestinians should push these films. These films tell a story, a true story, and and this whole thing about BDS, how is it relevant to crazy Israelis like me and other directors that risk ourselves and go make these films to change the world, and then Palestinians don't want to watch them? Why don't Palestinians take Blue Box? Why don't they take H2? And there's Leat Semel, the movie about Leat Semel. There's so many Israeli films that are made with Israeli money that tell the story. So I think it's time for the Palestinians to look at these films, both in America and in Palestine. And I actually actively talked to this with Palestinians, with the Palestinian Broadcasting Company, etc. And I hope this will happen. Again, I don't know if we will be able to make any more films like this with the new government, but we've made a lot.
Alon, obviously, we here believe in what you're saying. That's why we're showing your film, obviously. And I think there's a great benefit to show films like Tantura. We're actually showing another film in 2 weeks, Objector. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
It's an Israeli film that you don't know about. It's about a young woman who refused to be recruited in the Israeli army.
Okay.
And ended up going to prison. And it tells the story and why she didn't want to be recruited. Why didn't she want to serve in the army, and how she didn't like what the army was doing. And she went to places where Palestinians were persecuted and stood with the Palestinians and took a stand. And I think a film like that is also very important, because it shows the American audience, for example, that it's not just the Palestinians that are telling these things, it's the Israelis also.
Yes.
And your condemnation of the actions of the Israeli military and the police is very effective. It's a lot more effective than our condemnation of it.
I know, and this is something that I had trouble with, because when we came out in Sundance, you won't believe this, but there was a whole campaign against this film, against Tantura, saying, why isn't Israeli this whole how is it called in America? I forget the name. Woke. There's a woke movement, left, that says you can't tell a story about Black people if you're not Black. You can't tell the Palestinian story if you're an Israeli Jewish. You can tell a story if it's good and if you're honest, no matter what your color, your race, your gender is. This is the truth. Maybe I'm getting old and I don't understand the new generation, but I hold. This is what I believe, and this is the truth that I see. And this is a Palestinian story like it is an Israeli story. And there was criticism from Palestinians in America. Why did a Jewish guy make this film? Later on, when the Palestinian Authority took it, we broke through that ceiling. But at the end of the day, these movies exist, and the great challenge is bringing it to viewers, because American mass media companies like Netflix don't take these movies. And Amazon, you can put it on their pay-per-view, and very little people pay because they have a lot of free movies. So the challenge is, how do we put Tantura and the next Tanturas on the Netflix free platform, and then millions will see it, millions. And that to me as a filmmaker, it annoys me. I understand it very well today. And the answer is they auto-censor things. They auto-censor things because they're afraid what the guy on the board will say. And that's the truth, and it's very sad truth. And it's hushed down. But it won't help. At some point, we will put this film out on the internet, and people will do and will see it.
You raise a really good question about just access to information and democracy, and give us a lot to chew on in that regard.
Yes.
Even as Americans, we have to always challenge our right to access information, and not allow things to just be swept under the rug because it's not because it's difficult to watch or makes people uncomfortable.
Krista,
I have to say one thing in your that I saw before. Now we have I don't know how many viewers we had. When I logged in, we had over I think almost 500 viewers. That's a lot of viewers what you had today. Beautiful.
Yeah, actually, Alon, we had 1,040 registered.
That's incredible. But the important thing is not registered. Is how many
Right, you want them to watch.
The viewers are important. So 495, I think the image was, and I will connect you to Michal White from, if you want, from Blue Box. Please screen her film.
Yes.
Please go to H2. These films need to be watched, and they're not watched in America, even not by Palestinians.
Actually, I was researching H2, and I was looking for a way to make contacts with the director. So
I will give you all the contacts to all the Israelis. I want to give a message to the Palestinians. There's a huge audience in Israel, not audience, a huge population in Israel that wants peace with the Palestinians, that wants a Palestinian state, that doesn't want apartheid, that wants democracy for all. We are fighting for this. We are working for this. We are losing money for this. And not all Israelis are bad, even if they grew up as Zionists. Not all of them are bad. And we see you, and we know you are there. And there is a peace movement in Israel. We are also, our heads are put down, but we are here. And this is an important message for Palestinians all over the world to know. The Israelis that want peace are here.
that's great to hear, Alon, and very, very important message from you. Before we wrap up here, and by the way, there were about almost 500 people watching. It's not 500 persons; it's 500 households.
Right.
Of course.
So
it's incredible. It's one of the biggest we've had actually online.
Yeah, and I think we want to screen it again because the 500 people that did not attend.
Right, we want them to come back.
Wanted to attend actually and couldn't make it, or so forgot or something, because we announced it a little bit.
I will be here whenever you tell me, Faisal. And I ask you one more thing: if there's more Palestinian organizations or non-Palestinian organizations that you know about that will want to screen them, please let them know. I will be here. We'll make it available. That's the way to go. And next time let's have Teddy Katz also join us. I think he would be very happy.
That would be incredible.
Great. One final question before we close. Are you working on something new now? What are you working on?
So
to the extent you can share.
I'll tell you, I'm a guy that tells the truth, at least as I see it, as you understand. So right now, I decided not to make a next film. I have thoughts whether I want to continue living in Israel due to this government that we have. I'm not sure I do. You have to understand that to Palestinians, it looks like we're terrible and we've always been bad, and Zionism is just bad. But I have to tell you, as somebody living in Israel, that up till now, although we were terrible to Palestinians outside of Israel, etc., in Israel it felt like somewhat of democracy. And now this government is scaring the living daylights out of us because the standards of what happened in the occupation are now put inside into Israel. So it's a very scary situation in Israel. We don't know where this government is going. It looks like Israel is going to turn into complete dictatorship in the Hungarian model of, there's countries that say they're democracy, but they're not. And I don't know if that will happen. It looks like it will. I don't know if I will continue to live here. I don't feel like.
Do you think you could have more influence if you were outside of?
I think I'll tell you the unpopular and the not hero American dream kind of answer. I kind of wanted my life back, at least for some time. I've been working around the clock. It's very hard to make movies. It's very hard to listen to hours and hours and of testimonies and of mass graves. The movie I made before dealt with the post-Holocaust story. So I also dealt with Bergen-Belsen and the Jewish catastrophe before that, which was in numbers even much greater than not that it matters for comparison, but it's horrific as well, the Holocaust. And I need for my psychological well-being, I need to get away for a little bit from Holocaust and from Nakba and from movies in general. I will be back in a year or two with a new movie.
We can only hope that since you have the talent and you carry the burden of an artist.
Yeah, but for now, what I want is to and look, a lot of people in Israel, write, he's a traitor. He made money. He did it for the money, which is a complete bullshit. Of course, I didn't do it for the money. I lost from my high-tech years. I lost money on films. You don't make money in films unless Netflix buy them, but they don't buy these films, of course. So I need rest. I want to build a little house with a view on some remote place, probably in Europe, and I want to rest a little bit for a year or two and get back my forces. It's very hard psychologically. It's very hard to go to swim up current in Israel. I'm very popular in the very far left, but even in the Zionist left, I'm not popular, and it's not fun. It's not fun to go against the narrative of your country. It's very hard actually. So I need to relax a little bit, but I will be back. Before I started making Tantura, I made a film about the end of democracy in Israel, and I kind of feel it's happening now. So maybe I will make that film in a year. But we'll see.
Great. Well, we are really wrapping up. We've, I think, spent quite a bit of time. And very, very important film, very important discussions here. We apologize to the audience. We could not answer all the questions. There are tons of remarks in the chat and a lot of questions. So I'm documenting. We're saving the chat and we're saving the questions, and I will share them with you, Alon, so you can see what all the commentary has been going on here. I'm sure you're seeing some of it on your side.
I'm trying to read. I'm very curious, but I can't do it simultaneously. I would read after. But my message is this. Let's just have a final message. It's incredibly important for Israelis to recognize Nakba in order to recognize the other side. And I hope it will happen. This is one brick in the wall. This film, it's just a brick in the wall, but it's an important brick. And I will do everything I can to tell the story. And you guys need to take other Israeli films and show them, and focus on American decision makers. The only way to change reality is through American policy. That's the truth as I see it, and I hope it will happen. And we're giving you the tools. Show them to the politicians. Send them to the politicians in America. Have them view it. And to the Jews, also to the liberal Jews.
Yeah, your talk is being recorded on Facebook, and in a few minutes, people will be able to listen to it again. So that's in addition to the hundreds of people that heard you. And anyway, so we'd like to thank you so much for joining us, and we will have some more to talk shortly. And we should probably rescreen this in 2-3 weeks or so, because there are over 500 people that did not see the film that signed up to see it. So those people are probably going to want to see it. And now every time we show a film, the second time we show it, we have more people seeing it than the first time, because then they tell their friends and their friends tell their friends. And
I'll be happy to be here again, Faisal. We
Yes.
just let's do the date, and if you have more Palestinian organizations or others, I'll be there too. I'm
Yeah.
here to do this. This is my mission.
Yeah,
Well,
one
thank
more-
you for joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Just a couple of announcements for our audience on Facebook and on Zoom. Next week, our film is On the Doorstep by Sahira Dirbas, a Palestinian filmmaker. It's about a young American woman that goes to Palestine to take a look at her grandfather's estate, which was a big, huge house in Jerusalem. And it's a kind of an interesting film to watch. So hopefully a lot of you will register and see that film. The week after that, we have the film Objector, which we talked about the Israeli young woman who refused to serve in the army. And we're working on the schedule after that. So would like, just to remind everybody that's the Palestine Museum US, our mission is to research and preserve Palestinian history and to tell the Palestinian story through the arts. And we consider arts broadly, and film is one of those arts that we concern ourselves with. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to Alon again. And thanks, Krista. And as we say at the end in Arabic, ma salama. Bye-bye.
Bye.